that we also have a pastoralism associated with ducks. And these are the people who move with the herd of flock of 1,000, 2,000 ducks. They are primarily found in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, parts of Goa, and parts of Karnataka. So very rich range of pastoralism, actually the richest in the world. Then we have, of course, fishermen, both those who fish on inland as well as marine. Then naturally we have agriculturists and some expert horticulturists. And besides sedentary people who mostly live in their own habitats, but we also have very rich nomadic populations. Our estimate is that of the order of about 3 to 4% of our people, they lead no pattern of nomadism. That is of both kind, pastoral are also nomads as well as non-pastoral nomads, etc. And a lot more information is available. And then we have, of course, the IT specialists and various other kinds of specialists in various kinds of branches of science, and you all represent that particular component of our population. So this much of heterogeneity is really mind-boggling. What all implications it has is basically in terms of biodiversity is simple, that against each one of these categories, just expand the expression and then you would know that those who are pure hunters and gatherers, they would require a certain kind of biodiversity, and therefore, naturally, they will have a lot of knowledge about that biodiversity. Same way, shifting cultivation and every category. In other words, that each category is a unique category and that they possess unique knowledge about certain components of the biodiversity. So in order to comprehend all, therefore, we need to interact with people from all these areas. Now, that was an interesting exercise. Madhav and I, in 1982, we wanted to know that how many endogamous groups, which means Mendelian population, are, in other words, we use the expression jati. So how many jatis do we have in our country? We were both surprised that there were no estimates available except if you read Enthoven or some census accounts, and therefore we undertook this massive exercise, looked into various kinds of databases, and we estimated then that our country has about the order of about 40,000 endogamous groups. These 40,000 endogamous groups are organized in two broad social organization or social structure. One belonging to the Hindu caste system. Our estimate is that they may be of the order of about 37,000. The remaining one represent different religious sects, tribal populations, and some more migrants like Parsis, Siddhis, and so on and so forth. Now, in this chart, you would see from top till the bottom. From leaves aside the bottom line, the last one, that is jatis, and then we have mentioned about endogamous. The rest all are sociological categories. And in terms of the biological and cultural entity are indeed the endogamous groups, variously known as jatis and so on and so forth. So this is the kind of richness that we have, and we therefore needed now a framework of understanding the relationship between biodiversity and culture. Now, this can be done at three levels: species, habitat, and landscape protection. So that is at these three levels we can consider and see. Now, if we look into the framework, there will be certain elements of culture, they are widespread. So they are pan-Indian in nature. There will be some which are region-specific, endogamous group-specific. Below that are the clan-specific, family, and finally individual level. That is, all these categories will have certain kind of relationship with the different species. So, in other words, that they all represent. If it is pan-India, is another level. If it is individual, is another. So different levels of conservation ethos that we have. Now, conservation consequences can be also seen through this simple way of putting it. What we need, the first thing is, and that is respect for nature. Many articles I have read, more so in the recent times, and several of them tend to describe Indian society, irrespective of further divisions, caste, religion, and so on and so forth, or ethnicity, that they think that Indian society retains the bulk of the conceptual framework of animism, which essentially means that they have a certain deep-rooted respect for nature. And that is what is reflected in many of our cultural practices, and that has positive implication in terms of. Now, at a species level, one could consider some of these practices. So, like there are some sacred species. So, like sacred species, we all know that there are many tree species, particularly belonging to ficus species, Ficus religiosa, people, banyan, where we all know more or less throughout the country they are worshipped and they will not be cut. So this way we have many species, all non-human primates that people normally will not hunt. Of course, there are some exceptions, but otherwise. So that these are a range. We have a list of various sacred species that are there, which essentially means from these species nothing will be harvested. They will be protected. Then ritual uses of species. We all are aware we perform many rituals from birth to death. And you would see that a lot of components of biodiversity, both plants and animals, they are essential components of those rituals. So also there are also seen that there are cultural practices which lead to prudent use of the biodiversity. These things I will explain a little bit. Now, all these ones have implications in terms of species conservation. Obviously, if we need a species which is sacred, and we are indeed not going to harm it. Second one, if it is important for some ritual, we will make sure that it is available to us, and therefore our relationship will be very, very tender, which will have enormous respect to see that it doesn't become extinct. Now, the next one is what are the elements that actually help us at the habitat level. What are those practices? So sacred groves are people sitting here, Devrai, as we call them in Maharashtra or Devarhati. These are, there are sacred ponds, there are sacred stretches of river, there are pools, and so on. There are numerous water bodies that they are sacred, and therefore in those one, whatever biological life that exists, fish, turtle, crabs, snakes, etc., they will all receive protection. Then we have myths and totems. So there are a lot of myths in terms of origins. A particular clan may think that our ancestors actually was a crow or was a tiger, and so on and so forth. Then we have omens and vagaries. As you all know, many of us put on something over here, something over here, and so these astral species that they have certain supernatural influence on us. So all these together then lead to habitat protection and together protection of the species. Now species, we will be now sharing with this I have already mentioned that the conceptual framework is different level. Oh, okay. Just one moment. हाँ. हाँ, ठीक है. So now we will be sharing with you some of the cultural practices that are related to, that leads to species protection and followed by the habitat protection. Now, species protection, as I mentioned in the introductory section, that there could be various reasons, and one of the most important one under the mythology section are the totemic species, which essentially means that a particular clan or a particular family or a particular lineage, but mostly at clan level or at tribe level, that people think that their ancestors were, as I mentioned earlier, anything. It could be a plant, it could be an animal. Now, we will, all these various, because later these headings will come, so I will move on to the first section, that is, what are the totemic species? Now, if a particular species has a status of being totemic species, this would then normally mean, among many other things, one, that particular clan will never kill this particular species. If it is plant, they will not harvest anything out of that. If animal, never kill. Not only that, they will make sure that in their own vicinity that no person from any other clan kills that particular species. So obviously that the implications are that in a given area, suppose there are 10 clans, and out of that 8 clans have totemic animal species. So at their habitat, wherever they exist, those particular animals definitely will exist. I will show later a few interesting things about this. Now, we have about 1,000 groups in our country that practice totemism. The data still is inadequate, and I personally feel that actually there will be many more endogamous groups who practice totemism. The animals that are associated as totems, it is extremely interesting. They are right from insect like grasshopper to the flagship mammals like elephant, tiger, and of course several birds, reptiles, etc. So it's a huge range. Is the same range is reflected in the plants, right from herbs to trees, that is angiosperm. So that this all would mean that in a given area that we have reduced, we have partitioned in some ways the resources and thereby reduce the pressure on a particular species. Now, we conducted this study in West Bengal, covering a couple of tribal populations. Those are there. And then we also noted for those ones the various kinds of totems that they have. And you can see under the list that as the plants, there are plants also associated as well as animals. And very quickly, if you glance in this slide and the next slide, that there indeed are wide range of biodiversity, both faunal and floral, that comes as totems. So this would mean that at least in those particular villages or territory where a particular clan lives and a particular animal plant is totem, you will 100% find. Now, we did this particular analysis in West Bengal, and more carefully, we actually documented the spread of all these clans geographically in Midnapur district, and friends from different disciplines who could identify easily, that we found that those, including elephant, that those were the totems, they indeed they were all available in some numbers. We don't know exactly, but they were present. So this is a very important component of a culture which has deep-rooted seeds and a relationship with different components of the biodiversity. This one gives you an idea of similar one that we did for several tribes in Odisha, and the number of clans and the totems, the same kind. Now, the other one I was mentioning earlier, that right from birth to death, biodiversity is associated with many of the rituals and practices that we follow. We did this again study in West Bengal, and you can see clearly again that at birth and later right up to death, there is a large amount of biodiversity that is associated. Now, all the implications of all this obviously are that it will help continuation of those particular species which are deeply rooted in our rituals, culture, and worship, etc. Now, there are also the ones that we actually use, that is consumptive use. What one sees is, it is not ruthless. It is all culturally moderated, and that there are seasonal restrictions. So several examples we have over here, I would not further detail on, but these are very interesting examples that people will not start eating a particular part of a particular tree unless a particular ritual has been performed. We are all quite familiar with this because we also do in our own areas. Like sea fishing is banned, we are all familiar. Same way, so one example that particularly in relationship to animals is extremely interesting, that in general those who hunt and that they avoid killing the pregnant female. Also during breeding season, hunting is stopped. Often where the animals have a social behavior that they exist in groups, usually people try to avoid not to kill the leader of that particular group, and the implications of regeneration. One example I would like to share with you, which I learned last month, that ongeys in Andaman Islands, for them a very important animal as food is wild boar. Without that, simply they cannot live. 24 hours in their camps, wherever they are, that there will be some utensil and pork is there boiling.